In the continuation of my guide to version 42, we've landed on part 2, which is your first deck. You have taken some time to study the cards, get an idea of what they can do, what they're all about, what do gems do, and you have played every single role and every lane at least a couple times in a bot match. So now that you have a good idea of the new gameplay and kind of what the whole system's about, now we move on to building our first deck. Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a version 42 guide. I am Sylphin. So, the very first thing about building your first deck here in version 42 is to get to know your cards. You got to know them as you were opening your veterans chests previously, and hopefully you've been writing some things down. You have been really conscious of what cards work with some heroes, what are some amazing synergies in the cards with the heroes, and hopefully you have an idea of what cards you want. Now, remember, any affinity and any hero can be used for any hero. Any affinity, any card can be used on any hero. So any card is up for grabs for any hero. That's big. That means you got to know all the cards and see if all the cards from any affinity works on that hero. So it's not so simple as, this hero has 2 affinities, I just got to care about those 2 cards. No, before you had limited options, in version 42, you have all of the options. Very important for you to know. You got to know all your cards. Now, with that said, there's 3 things I personally think you should really know when you go to build a deck for a hero. More on that later. You have to know economy cards. In my opinion, economy cards are probably in the new competitive scene that's going to come out really important. Are you playing the late game, are you playing that kind of a game that scales into mid and late game, or are you just not? Are you going to forget about the economy cards? Personally, I think economy cards are going to be one pillar of any deck. The next one is tier 1, slot 1, and other key gems for your hero or for your role. In the jungle role, you have to know the jungle assassin and the jungle Sylphin gems. You just got to know them. Got to know which ones am I going to take, and of course other key jungle cards. You got to know those T1 and kind of key gems like lifesteal gem or a multi-shot gem for carries. For tanks, that damage reduction gem or the damage reflection. You got to know those key gems for those certain heroes and roles, and also key hero cards. There are some cards that synergize so well with some heroes, you just can't not have them. There's that one that gives health back for mana for mana that you regen, which is obviously a must-have on Zinks. That is just an example. You have to know those 3 things before going into building your deck. Economy cards, key economy cards, if you want them or if you're going to use them. T1, especially your tier 1 and any key gems for that hero or role, and key hero cards. Now, just briefly, what are economy cards? Increasing your gold or hero experience in a match. So Coin Master, one of the best economy cards for the off lane, in my opinion. Gain 8 bonus gold, or as a support actually, every 10 seconds, etc. You gotta know that. This is the economy cards that you can have as an option. Now, key gems, again, gave some options, but the jungle lifesteal. This is something you have to know about as a jungle. If you're going to make a jungle deck for a hero, you got to know about it. Or the jungle assassin. Just some examples of key gems you got to know about. And another example of a key card for a hero is Death Crawler. This one, absolutely key for Kalari, as every 8 seconds she can come out of stealth. Boom, there's triple damage from that already gigantic attack. Absolutely must have, in my opinion, on somebody like Kalari. And all heroes have these cards that synergize tremendously well with them. You have to know these 3 key things before going into a deck building. So now that you've gotten to know your cards and gems and stuff, now you got to do some scouting. You got to kind of get a flavor of, well, what am I thinking of doing with this deck? Now, in my opinion, even though they've made decks completely, well, you can use it on any hero, I still think you have to make a deck for a certain hero and for a certain role. To be honest with you, we are still in a system where you need one deck for one role for one hero. Let's just be real. Some carries may be able to get away with the same thing, like perhaps a Yin and a Serath could share a deck as a safe lane, but then Serath is usually in the off lane, or maybe even in the jungle now in version 42. So it's still, in my opinion, one deck for one role for one hero. Now, therefore, you have to scout key gems and cards for that one hero. What gems best fulfill your role and synergize with your hero? What cards best fulfill your role and synergize with your hero? And what economy cards do you think you can utilize? Now you're actually searching for those 3 things you gotta know before you actually put the cards in your deck. Now, one of the things I've kind of noticed is, what are some overlaps? For example, a lot of some jungle stuff can kind of overlap. Like there's really great jungle restoration. This card, for example, the Mother Tree. Oh, if you get this one and you got the Sylphin, you actually have too much sustain. So this is just an example of where you have to kind of be careful of overlap, something kind of canceling each other out, and then just kind of wasting resources and wasting cards. You gotta kind of see, am I gonna actually use that, or is that already being accomplished from another card or for another gem? Because there are 2 different things, and you know, you gotta pick your gems and then your cards, or pick your cards and then your gems. You have to be careful of overlaps and stuff like that. Now, for example, what I have done here, what I've started to do, is write down what sort of cards I want on certain heroes. Gems, I have a good idea for the gems of what I want, but the cards, because there's almost 120 of them, 25 times 5 almost, there's 120 of them. You gotta, I have to write them down. So here's Zinx. Pensive Shaman was that one card that I know I just gotta have. I gotta have it. Pensive Shaman, you just gotta have it. So that makes growth automatically something I'm gonna get for Zinx. Plus, she's gonna be in the off lane, and there's some great economy cards I want on her to kind of counteract the fact that I might not be getting that great economy. Now, the other cards though for Zinx, honestly, there's a lot of options, in my opinion, for her. I've just kind of like, oh, that'd be great on Zinx. Oh, that'd be great on Zinx. Oh, that'd be great. And I just write it down, and I kind of write down the cost and what affinity it is. And now, if I'm going to make a deck, I just got to go, well, growth, I just got to have it. And I like the economy cards, so boom, I'm going to go for growth. Then, well, if you want to just go by numbers here, Order seems to have some pretty good things in here. And I know that Order treats offlaners and bruiser brawlers actually really quite well. So I'm probably going to go with Order. But if I really wanted to be a death growth Zinx, I might, you know, check Sorvuk initiate a little bit more. Or maybe this knowledge, depending on it. So at this point, you got to scout out, write things down, kind of see exactly what you want, just so you don't overlap anything. So, now that we've gotten a good idea, now you actually have to build the deck. So, like we said, knowledge, and I'm probably going to go for Order at this point. Just simple as that. Now, at this point, you have to select your economy cards and key hero cards. I think that is what I want to do. I really like economy cards. I really like the economy play style of playing it safe in the early game and scaling into the mid game and late game. And that's just me, and I think it actually works. It works especially well in the off lane, as you can counteract the fact you don't have much economy to begin with. So at this point, you select those economy cards and those key hero cards. So that first one is Pensive Shaman. We absolutely need to have this, as you regenerate health equal to 20% of mana restored, and it's because you're going to restore a lot of mana. That's a lot of healing. Exactly what you need on Zinx. So after this, now I want key hero cards. That one was the key one, but is there anything else? So I'm going to go into the late game, pick that, and then go into the early game, just like I did previous version 42. I did my end game deck, and then I went into the early game, did those starting cards, and then I kind of filled in the mid game. That's basically what we do. So at this point, you just pick out the key hero cards, your key end game cards, and if there's any other key hero cards. So I've picked my endgame cards and just some good endgame options. Usually 3 for your endgame deck, and then kind of 1 option is what I would probably recommend. And then you start with the early game. I just want to point something out though. Wards, get them. If you're order, get wards. I don't care. Get wards. At least have it as an option. It's consumable. Literally, you have to get those wards for your team. Man, there we go. We picked our early game economy cards, and then I just kind of went, what are some other cards that I wanted in the early game, into the mid game, trying to follow that kind of general pattern. 3 early game cards, 3 mid game transition cards, and then 3 late game cards. It's kind of like your final build, your early game build, which I personally just like a lot of economy cards. 3 mid-game transition cards, and actually one good point is trying to find early game damage. It's actually a little bit harder than you realize. So Poised Aggressor here gives us basic damage after we dive in on the enemy duo, for example. Pack Leader, it's a bit different, but you can sick your entire minion wave on the enemy team, and hopefully they kind of crowd around them and get all body blocked and stuff like that. Pack Leader plus minions do a lot of damage in version 42, so there's that. And then, well, Ward, you just gotta get it. Sorry, you just honestly gotta get it. Another damage card here that also grows. Then there's some mid-game cards that you just kind of get, and there you go. So 12 out of 12 cards here. We went with our key hero cards first, our end game deck with its option. We went for the early game, got the economy cards that I personally just really love and recommend. Then we got our early game and mid game transition cards with some options in there as well. So there you guys go. That is the card portion of this. That, you know, you got to keep in a few things: the vision cards, consumables, and power and power-ups. The consumables here are like the shadow wards, but for damage dealers, the consumables are the power tap in the knowledge and other things. And consumables in the sense where Hellfire Piston, some card like that, where you just gain a ton of damage, but it's removed when you die. So it's almost a consumable. You got to think of those ones. The power-ups where you can just spend gold to just increase your base stats, stuff like that. You got to keep those in mind, because if you're order, people are counting on you for those shadow wards, and of course vision and other affinities as well. There's certain things that you kind of really have to consider. There are also the activatable sort of cards where you equip it and then you activate it to get certain effects. It either consumes it or you just be aware of those kind of cards, as their value here in version 42 is much more than you may think. Now, at this point, you simply slot in your gems. There are those key gems that you absolutely just need to get right away, but the gems are more of a fluid sort of thing that you can just kind of pick and choose which ones you want. So now we pick our gems. The key ones here definitely going to be here for, you know, this Zinx offlane deck. Absolutely healing towers. Another key one here is mana reactor. Because of that must-have card on Zincs, we're going to restore mana for every damage we take. We're reducing the damage we take, but we're going to gain mana for every damage we take, which, because we're gaining mana, we're going to get health from that mana that we're regenerating. And you can see it's a nice, lovely feedback cycle. These key gems, slot them first. Now, one thing you really need to know about is you don't have to put a gem in every slot. If you want to get higher up in the slots, you don't need a gem in the previous slot. So there's nothing really in slot 19 that I really found too overly exciting, so I left it out. Improved health regen because, well, we're going to need to get that health back because you have to take 50% of the damage. Boom, here's improved health regen. Plus, the other ones were kind of, they were okay. Then you just kind of simply fill in your gems. Take into consideration the early game, but also to consider that the early game is only the early game. And if it's something that's only good for the early game, and that just kind of becomes useless later on, that may be something you don't get. And ladies and gentlemen, here we are with our finalized deck. We've picked all of our gems, making sure to include the fact that the early game's only the early game. It doesn't necessarily, you know, become useful later on. We've taken everything into account. Picked our key hero cards, our key early game economy cards, picked our transition cards, picked our key gems, picked just whatever gems we really wanted to get, and that was it. So here's my Zincs offlane deck that may be a little fun to try. So in general, guys, step one here of building your first deck is you gotta get to know your cards. Any card is available, so you have much more to choose from when you're building your decks. The three most important things to know: economy cards, T1 gems, and key gems, and just those like must-have key hero cards. You gotta know those. Next, you gotta scout. You gotta scout out. I knew right off the bat I needed to write things down, so I have my little notepad of all my good ideas, hopefully, you know, beside heroes. Because gems, I kind of know what the gems are. There's much less gems than there are cards. Next, you got to scout out for good gems, cards, and those economy cards that you want to use. Kind of make sure you know before you go into your deck building. Then you just got to pick your affinities and cards. You're going to pick the two affinities which are like, yeah, I think those are kind of what suit my playstyle, what I want to do with this deck on this hero in this role, because remember, pretty much one deck per role per hero. Good deck structure: 3 early game, 3 mid, 3 late game cards with 3 flex cards. Either flex in the early, mid, and late, or if you don't want to be flexible, just 3 random optional cards. Another structure didn't really mention is 4-4-4 early, mid, and late, with 1 being optional for each portion. It's kind of the same thing, but maybe it's easier for you to think of it that way. Keep in mind, vision cards, consumables, and power-ups. Those other things that you can just kind of take temporarily for a nice boost, and then just kind of re-equip your other cards that just sit there while you're actually out on the battlefield. There's nuance to this deck system, and a lot of synergies that it takes a while to kind of grasp. Then you just select your gems. Select your key gems first, your early game gems, and then just kind of go through you know, the gems that really work with your hero. You got to consider that your affinities that you choose to emphasize in your cards probably you know, have to be the gems that you prioritize in those affinities as well. So as you can see, lots of vitality cards with, yeah, there's a little bit of agility, but there's not many agilities here. Agility ones that I would like is I would like to focus on being very tanky, but still doing some damage here. Spellburn, yeah, there's going to be some knowledge because she is a caster, so there you go. that is my part 2 here of your first experiences here in version 42. After this, guys, play the deck. Play the deck, make more decks for more heroes, and go into PvP and just have fun. Have fun, play the game, get more and more used to it, see what other people do, see what great synergies other people do with certain cards and certain heroes, and you start to get an idea of the possibility space that exists here in version 42. In general, we have many more options than we had before. We had 6 equipment slots before, and now we basically have 9. 6 gems and 3 cards, all with amazing passives and actives that completely change the way you play your hero. So in my honest opinion, there's much more diversity, much more options, many more ways to play your heroes now in version 42, and all it takes is your knowledge of the system to improve. And I hope that you guys do that. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. Please let me know down in the comments if there's any way better to improve your first couple experiences here in version 42. I would love to learn from you, and everybody else would love to learn as well. Please like this video if you like it, dislike it if you dislike it, share it with the community, and of course, guys, subscribe. You guys like this content, especially if you found it useful. Please subscribe so I can do it for you in the future. If you would like to support me on a regular basis, please head on over to my Patreon account where you can make a pledge to help me do what I love. Till next time, like always, guys, stay optimistic and positive.